The fog that descended upon Venice that October evening seemed to carry with it the very essence of mystery itself. As I, Arthur Hastings, stood upon the water terrace of the Hotel Danieli, watching the thick, gray shroud settle over the Grand Canal, I could not have imagined that within hours, those same mists would conceal a murder most ingenious and terrible. My friend Hercule Poirot stood beside me, his small, neat figure rigid with displeasure as he surveyed the obscured vista.
A forgery,
his famous
perhaps,
mustaches,
or
waxed
merely
to
a clever
perfection
distraction.
despite the dampness, bristled with indignation at what he clearly considered a personal affront by the Venetian weather. "It is entirely against the natural order, Hastings," he declared, adjusting his immaculate evening dress with characteristic precision. "This fog, and it transforms the most logical of cities into a maze of uncertainties. How can one observe properly when the very air conspires to hide the truth?" I chuckled at his vexation, though I confess the thick mist did lend an ominous quality to the evening.
The more I examine the facts,
Come now,
the deeper the
Poirot.
shadows seem
Surely
to grow.
even you must
is a
admit
mystery
there's something
wrapped in a
romantic
shroud.
about Venice
We
shrouded
depart
in
for
mystery.
Berkshire immediately. See to the
Romance,
luggage yourself,
Poirot
George.
sniffed delicately,
I want no mistakes.
is merely
This case
sentiment
is far too
obscuring
important.
reason. And tonight, mon ami, we shall have quite enough obscurity without the assistance of atmospheric conditions. How prophetic those words would prove to be. The gathering of suspects. We were bound for the Palazzo Rossetti, where Lady Venetia Pemberton was hosting what her invitation had termed an intimate gathering of discerning souls. The Palazzo, a Gothic masterpiece of the 15th century, loomed out of the fog like a stage set designed for tragedy. Light blazed from its tall windows, and as our water taxi approached the private landing, we could hear the sound of a string quartet playing something that seemed to mock the gathering darkness. Lady Pemberton herself greeted us at the water entrance with the assured manner of a woman who had never doubted her place in the world's hierarchy. She was perhaps 50, handsome rather than beautiful, with steel gray hair arranged in an elaborate coiffure and diamonds that glittered at her throat like captured stars. Her eyes held the sharp intelligence of a predator, and when she smiled, it was with the satisfaction of a spider welcoming flies to her web. "Captain Hastings, Monsieur Poirot, how absolutely divine that you could join us," she exclaimed. And though I detected beneath her enthusiasm something harder, more calculating. "I have assembled the most fascinating collection of people tonight. Each one, I assure you, has their own delicious secrets." The main salon was a symphony of Venetian splendor, its frescoed ceilings depicting scenes of triumph and betrayal. Crystal chandeliers casting dancing shadows upon walls hung with priceless tapestries. But it was the assembled guests who truly commanded attention, for Lady Pemberton had indeed gathered a remarkable collection of individuals, each one seemingly harboring their own private storms. Clarissa Pemberton, Lady Pemberton's niece, stood by one of the tall windows,
I'm afraid,
like a figure
Monsieur
from a
Poirot.
pre-Raphaelite painting.
Terribly afraid.
She was perhaps 25,
You must help
with
me.
the kind of fragile English beauty that seemed perpetually on the verge of shattering.
Weeks ago.
And her pale
A
blue
letter
silk
written by
gown
my
matched
late
her
husband.
troubled eyes, and there was something in her manner that spoke of secrets
letter
too
written
heavy
by your
for
husband?
such delicate shoulders to bear. Beside her, though not quite
The
with
letter
her,
was kept in a
stood
safe
Count
in the
Alessandro Moretti, her fiancé. He was a striking man of perhaps 35, with the classical features and
Devastating would be a
natural
more
elegance
accurate
that
word.
spoke of centuries of Venetian nobility. Yet there was something in
years
his
ago,
dark
Sir Edmund
eyes,
died in
a
this
calculation,
library.
perhaps
The
even a
official
cruelty,
cause was a fall,
that made one wonder
I've
what
always
lay
wondered what
beneath
pushed
that
him.
aristocratic
But her husband's
facade.
theme is murder.
Professor Edmund Blackwood commanded attention near the fireplace, his weathered face and careful hands speaking of a lifetime spent handling precious artifacts. Though dressed in impeccable evening wear, he carried himself with the slightly distracted air of a scholar, with his eyes holding the kind of knowledge that comes from studying the rise and fall of civilizations. In sharp contrast, Madame Irina Volkov draped herself across a velvet sofa with theatrical grace. Her platinum blonde hair and crimson lips proclaimed her origins in a world where survival depended upon one's ability to reinvent oneself. She claimed to be a Russian princess, though her accent seemed to shift subtly, depending upon her audience.
What has changed?
Mr. Gerald Thornton, Lady Pemberton's solicitor, hovered near his employer with the nervous energy of a man who knew too many dangerous secrets.
My husband's secretary.
His thin frame and precise manner suggested someone who dealt in legal niceties, though his eyes held a fear that no amount of professional discretion could entirely conceal. The American, Mr. James Rutherford, has provided a jarring note of modernity among the European sophistication. Young, brash, and possessed of the restless energy that comes with new money, he seemed to view the assembled company as potential business opportunities rather than social equals.
As I choose to remember
Finally,
him
there was Dr. Marcus Chen, whose quiet presence and intelligent eyes suggested depth that others might easily overlook. As Lady Pemberton's late husband's physician, he carried with him the weight of professional secrets and personal knowledge that made him a dangerous man to underestimate.
That is an outrageous suggestion.
Poirot arrives. As Lady Pemberton led us through the introductions, I observed Poirot's characteristic method of cataloging each individual with the precision of a naturalist studying exotic specimens. His green eyes missed nothing. Not Clarissa's trembling hands, not the Count's barely concealed impatience, not the way Professor Blackwood and Madame Volkoff avoided each other's gaze, not the solicitor's nervous glances toward his employer. "You have assembled a most interesting group, Lady Pemberton," Poirot observed with his customary politeness, though I detected the subtle undertone that suggested his little gray cells were already at work. Each person, they bring their own, how shall I say, particular atmosphere to the gathering. "How perceptive of you, Monsieur Poirot," Lady Pemberton replied, and there was something in her smile that made me suddenly uneasy. "I do so enjoy bringing together people who have connections. It makes for such stimulating conversation." The first revelation. Dinner was an elaborate affair. I served in a magnificent dining room where shadows danced in the candlelight, and every face seemed to hide secrets behind masks of social propriety. The conversation flowed with the wine, sometimes sparkling, sometimes sharp, and always revealing more than the speakers intended. It was during the final course that Lady Pemberton rose to her feet, her wine glass catching the light like liquid amber. The room fell silent as she commanded attention with the natural authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed.
They are placed beneath my pillow each night.
"My dear friends," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the sudden hush.
Chambers
"I
mentions
promised you all
Timothy
something
Ashford
special this
visiting in
evening,
July.
and the time has come to deliver on that promise. You see, I have not gathered you here merely for social pleasure, delightful though your company has been." The tension in the room became almost palpable. Clarissa's face had gone white, Count Moretti had half risen from his chair, and Professor Blackwood leaned forward with sudden, intense interest.
Trusting fool.
2 years ago, Lady Pemberton continued, my beloved husband Sir Malcolm died quite suddenly. The doctors assured me it was his heart, and I accepted their diagnosis. But recently, I have discovered certain documents that suggest his death was not the natural occurrence we all believed it to be. The silence that followed was broken only by the distant sound of water lapping against the palazzo's foundations. Every face around the table had become a study in barely controlled emotion. Fear, guilt, calculation, and something darker.
Olivia. It's more than generous for your silence
she
on the
announced
matter.
with evident satisfaction.
I expect you to be
Saw
gone
that
by
my
morning.
husband was murdered.
Monsieur Roderick,
and what's more,
your
I know
attachment to Miss
who
Olivia is
killed
quite
him.
profound, is it not?
The murder.
I love her, Inspector.
At that precise
I don't
moment,
care
as
what
if
they
summoned
say.
by the dramatic tension itself,
And here,
the lights
amongst
failed.
the silver,
In the
the
sudden,
truth
complete
begins
darkness,
to gleam.
chaos erupted. Voices called out in alarm and confusion. Chairs scraped against marble floors. And someone, moved with purpose through the blackness. Then came a sound that Poirot's trained ears recognized immediately. The sharp intake of breath that precedes death, followed by the soft thud of a body falling. Nobody move, Poirot commanded, his voice cutting through the panic with surprising authority. Hastings, your lighter, if you please. The small flame revealed a scene of horror. Lady Venetia Pemberton lay slumped forward across the table, her face buried in the remains of her dessert, the diamonds still glittering at her throat. A thin line of blood trickled from the corner of her mouth,
I'm asking
and
you
the
one
unmistakable
last time,
scent
Poirot.
of bitter
What
almonds
exactly
hung
do you
in the
want
air.
from me? Spit it
Dr.
out!
Chen moved forward with professional calm, his fingers seeking a pulse that was no longer there. After a moment, he looked up gravely. She's dead, he announced quietly. Cyanide poisoning from the smell, fast-acting and virtually instantaneous. Poirot's initial assessment.
Edmund and I
As the palazzo
never
erupted in
close.
fresh chaos, guests crying out in shock, servants appearing with lanterns, someone demanding that the police be summoned. Hercule Poirot stood in the dancing light
have nothing
like a
to
small,
hide.
neat island of calm in a sea of confusion. Please, he said, and though his voice was not raised, something in its
We know
tone
about the
commanded
stolen letter,
immediate
Philip.
attention. Everyone must remain exactly where they are. The scene,
Olivia
it must
Ashton
not
had the
be
most to lose.
disturbed. Hastings kindly
She
ensure
knew
that
all
no
the
one
secrets.
leaves the palazzo,
She's
and
calculating,
someone must
strategic.
indeed
Everything she
summon the
does is
authorities.
for her own advancement. Pure
As I hurried to
ambition
secure the
masked
exit,
as devotion.
I heard Poirot's voice
Let us
continue,
discuss Timothy
thoughtful
Ashford.
and precise, despite the
What did he
circumstances.
want when he visited you that
How
evening?
very convenient, he murmured,
So I
seemingly
profited
to
from their
himself,
mistakes.
that
It
Lady
wasn't
Pemberton
clean,
should
but neither
die
is this
at the
city.
very
I
moment
regret
she was
nothing,
about to reveal a
understand me.
murderer.
Nothing.
One might almost think that someone did not wish her revelations to be heard. When I returned, I found him standing beside the body, his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes moving methodically over the scene with the concentration of a master chess player studying a particularly complex position. What do you make of it, Poirot? I asked quietly. He turned to me, and in his green eyes I saw the familiar gleam that appeared whenever he encountered a puzzle worthy of his talents. What I make of it, mon ami, is this. We have before us a room full of people, any one of whom might be a
seem
murderer.
preoccupied
We
with
have
my
a victim
cellar, Inspector.
who claimed
Merely
to possess
admiring the
evidence of
collection
another
for a brick.
murder. We
Though I
have
find
poison
some
administered
volumes
in
more
darkness,
revealing than others.
ensuring that the killer's identity remains hidden. And we have...
My mother
He
is
paused,
prone
his
to
mustaches
flights of
twitching
fancy.
with what might have been satisfaction. We
Shall we
have what
discuss the matter
promises
of the
to be a
stolen
most
letter, then?
instructive evening. The fog outside
know you were
pressed
the
against
last
the
one in the
windows
vault,
like a
Roderick.
living thing.
Where is the
and
money?
somewhere in the palazzo's
I
ancient
swear, I don't know what
walls,
you're talking
a
about.
clock
I didn't take
chimed
anything.
midnight.
This
The
rain.
game, as they say,
It
was
feels
afoot.
like a warning.
And Hercule Poirot's little gray cells were already beginning their methodical work of
I am a
separating
grown
truth
man,
from
Mother.
deception.
You cannot dictate my
Is guilt
life
from
any
innocence
longer. If I
and
choose to marry
justice
her, I
from the
will,
shadows
and neither
that
you
had
nor your
gathered
money will
around the
stop me.
candlelit table
need to
where
discuss
death had
Timothy
come
Ashford.
calling. The Venetian police arrived within the hour,
I
their
have
launch
nothing to
cutting
say about
through
him.
the fog with practiced
closely.
efficiency.
The seal is
Commissario
here,
Luca Bellini
yes,
proved to
but
be a
this
man of
tiny
perhaps
smudge of
50
wax
years,
tells us
with
everything we
intelligent
need to
gray
know.
eyes and the weathered demeanor of someone who had witnessed too much of human nature's darker aspects. His English was precise, tinged with only the slightest accent. Monsieur Poirot, he said, recognizing my friend immediately upon examining his card. Your reputation precedes you even to these waters, though I regret we meet under such tragic circumstances. Poirot inclined his head with characteristic courtesy. The circumstances are indeed most unfortunate, Commissario. But perhaps together we may bring some order to this chaos. Dr. Chen confirmed his initial diagnosis for the official record. Cyanide poisoning, administered orally, causing near instantaneous death. The body was photographed and removed with professional efficiency, while the dining room was sealed to preserve evidence. The timing troubles me greatly, Poirot confided to Bellini as they examined the scene. Observe the wine glass, half empty, yet only Lady Pemberton died. The poison was not in the common bottle,
You mustn't think
but
I
added
regret
specifically
leaving,
to her glass. But consider,
But some
in
shadows are
complete
very
darkness, how could anyone locate her precise
keep this
glass
from you
with
any
such
longer.
accuracy?
It's
Bellini
true.
frowned, making careful notes.
I've been seeing him.
You suggest the poison was administered before the blackout?
Honor is a dangerous
Precisely.
thing, M.
The
Poirot.
darkness served not to conceal the act of poisoning, but to mask the moment of death itself. Our killer is methodical, theatrical, but above all, cautious. They came prepared.
See, these numbers
Poirot's
don't
eyes
lie.
gleamed with professional
They
interest.
tell me you belong
This
to
was
me
no
now.
crime of passion, Commissario. This required planning, timing,
I
and
believe
intimate
these ledgers
knowledge
confirm
of the
the
victim's
discrepancies we
habits.
discussed, Mr. Marsden.
They relocated to the library,
Bailment
where
House.
Poirot arranged himself behind the massive
see it
desk
clearly.
with characteristic
The missing
precision.
piece was right in front of me
We
the
shall
entire
begin,
time.
he announced, with
One
Mademoiselle
of you in this
Clarissa.
very room is guilty of
Lady
this
Pemberton's
heinous
niece
crime.
entered like a wraith.
The evidence,
her
I
pale
assure
blue
you,
gown
is
making her appear
irrefutable.
almost ethereal in the
Perhaps
lamplight.
murder.
She clutched a handkerchief
was
with
not a
white-knuckled
fall.
intensity, her red-rimmed eyes speaking of genuine grief.
You took the letter
Mademoiselle,
to protect your
Poirot
father's
began
memory, did you
gently.
not?
I understand your sorrow, but to find justice for your aunt, I must
I couldn't
ask
let the truth
difficult
come out
questions.
about the affair.
Oh, you were seated
I tried
beside
to
her
bury
when the
it,
lights
Father.
failed.
It was
What did you
misguided
observe?
loyalty, I know that now.
It was terrifying.
murder was separate.
She whispered, her voice barely audible. Complete darkness. Then that awful sound, like someone choking. I heard movement behind my chair, felt a draft against my neck. There was a smell. A smell? Poirot leaned forward intently. Tobacco. Stale tobacco mixed with something sweet. Cologne, perhaps. Someone passed very close to me in the darkness. Poirot made a precise note. Your engagement to Count Moretti. Your aunt approved of this union. Clarissa's composure cracked slightly. She threatened to disinherit me entirely if we married. She called Alessandro reckless, unsuitable. Tonight was supposed to be a reconciliation dinner. What a chance for her to see his better qualities. And if she had carried out this threat, I would have nothing. The estate, the money. It would all go to distant relatives or charity. Alessandro and I discussed it many times. We hoped tonight would
I
change
don't know
her
how
mind.
to thank you, Monsieur
But
Poirot.
now, with her
You've given
death,
us a chance
you
at
inherit
peace.
everything? I suppose so, she admitted, fresh tears spilling. But I didn't want it this way. Despite her controlling nature, I loved my aunt. She raised me after my parents died. I just wanted her blessing, not her death. Poirot studied her carefully. You mentioned your aunt met with her solicitor yesterday. Do you know the purpose of this meeting? Clarissa shook her head. Mr. Thornton seemed nervous all evening. More nervous than usual, I mean. He's always been rather anxious around Aunt Venetia. Send in Count Moretti, Poirot instructed as he dismissed her. The Count entered with the swagger of inherited nobility, settling into his chair without invitation and reaching for his cigarette case. Do not, Poirot said sharply. This is a murder investigation, not your private club. Moretti's eyes flashed with irritation, but he returned the case to his pocket. Ask your questions, detective. I have nothing to hide. You have gambling debts at the Casino de Venezia, substantial ones. A gentleman always has debts, Moretti replied with practiced nonchalance.
I told you.
Lady
I lost
Pemberton
my
was
ticket.
going to cover them as part
You
of the
must
marriage
believe me.
settlement.
I need to leave
Her death
tonight.
actually complicates my financial situation
She was
considerably.
terrified,
Poirot's
begging me not to
mustaches
go to the
twitched
police.
slightly.
But
Unless,
I
of
had to tell
course,
someone.
she had already
I had to
changed her
tell
will
you.
to exclude
Look,
your
over there.
fiancé.
That is where I
Then
saw him
her death
standing
would
just
solve
before the
all
whistle
your
blew.
problems at
Timing is
once.
crucial, madame.
The Count's
Crucial.
confident facade wavered almost imperceptibly. You're fishing, Monsieur. I needed Lady Pemberton alive and generous, not dead and silent. We shall see, Poirot murmured, his green eyes holding secrets of their own. Mr. Gerald Thornton entered the library with the
accounted for your
measured
movements
reluctance
between 10
of
and
a man
midnight.
approaching
I
his
was
own
alone.
execution.
Why
The
must you
solicitor's
persist
thin
with these
hands
dreadful
trembled as he settled
accusations?
into the chair, his usually precise appearance disheveled by nervous perspiration, despite the palazzo's stone chill. Monsieur Thornton, Poirot began, his voice carrying the deceptive gentleness of a confessor. You arrived this evening carrying documents of some significance, did you not? The solicitor's Adam's apple bobbed convulsively. Oh, Lady Pemberton summoned me urgently yesterday. She intended to alter her will tonight, immediately after dinner. She was quite adamant about the timing,
This
claiming she
chaos,
could not
this
sleep
smoke.
another night without rectifying
Are you
what
trying
she
to hide
called
something,
a
or
grave
merely
error
escape it?
in her estate planning. To what effect? Poirot leaned forward with sudden intensity. Complete disinheritance of Miss Clarissa, Thornton whispered, the words tumbling out as if he feared keeping them contained. She had discovered the full extent of Count Moretti's gambling debts. The entire estate was to be placed in a charitable trust for Venetian historical preservation. She wanted witnesses present to ensure the codicil could not be contested. And this document, was it signed?
Where were you at 10 o'clock,
No,
Mrs. Hillman?
that is the terrible irony.
told you I was
We
in
were
my
to
room.
complete the signing
I
after
didn't
her
see
announcement.
anything, I swear.
But then the lights failed,
Martine.
and she died, leaving the original
this is
will
true,
intact.
sir,
Miss
then you
Clarissa
are
remains the
guilty
sole
of
heiress.
bigamy.
Poirot made precise notations. During the blackout, monsieur, what did you observe? I was near the sideboard, frozen with terror,
The truth
but I
regarding
heard the
fortune.
distinct rustle
It was
of
not
silk,
chance, Inspector,
someone
but a
moving
meticulous
quickly near the
deception.
head of the table,
I simply applied
a
my little
woman's
grey
gown
cells to the
brushing
curious case
against
of the missing
furniture.
heir.
Put your hands behind your back.
After dismissing the visibly relieved solicitor,
All right, let's go. Move
Poirot turned to Commissario Bellini. Observe how death's timing serves someone's interests perfectly, my friend. Now, let us hear from Madame Volkov. The Russian woman swept into the room like a theatrical entrance, her crimson gown a deliberate contrast to the somber atmosphere. She arranged herself with calculated grace, her platinum hair catching the lamplight. Madame, Poirot began. Ah, you knew Lady Pemberton well? As well as one knows a cobra, she replied with surprising candor. We were rivals, not friends. She collected secrets like some collect jewels, and she used mine to manipulate me. She was blackmailing you? Extorting would be more accurate. I was born Irene Volkova to a St. Petersburg factory worker, not nobility. Lady Pemberton discovered this and demanded I use my connections to acquire certain items for her collection, items that occasionally required flexible ethics regarding their provenance. Poirot's eyes narrowed. What did you observe during the blackout? I remained absolutely still. One learns caution when one has lived dangerously. But I heard purposeful movement and smelled something distinctive. Bitter almonds mixed with expensive cologne. Death has a particular scent. I'm Monsieur Poirot. Could you identify the cologne? Masculine, European, not that dreadful American tobacco smell. Her lips curved in distaste. When she departed, James Rutherford entered with the aggressive energy of new money. The American businessman lit a cigar without permission, filling the ancient room with acrid smoke that made Poirot visibly wince. Can we make this quick? Rutherford demanded. I've got business to conduct. Your business with Lady Pemberton? Poirot inquired mildly. I wanted to buy this palazzo, convert it to a luxury hotel. She refused. Said she'd rather see it sink than have tourists trampling her memories. But she made me a proposition 3 days ago. Which was? Rutherford hesitated, his confidence wavering. She wanted my resources, private investigators, background checks. She was convinced someone at tonight's dinner had murdered her husband. She offered to reconsider the sale if I helped her find proof. And did you investigate?
He threatened me.
Didn't have time. She died before I could
cannot
start.
let this continue.
He produced a silver Zippo lighter, flicking it open with practiced ease. Poirot studied the flame thoughtfully. During the blackout, why did you not use this to provide light? I didn't think of it. Panic, I guess. Strange, Poirot murmured as the American departed, that a man of action should freeze when others needed illumination. Bellini consulted his notes. 3 more suspects remain, Monsieur Poirot. The pattern becomes clearer. Indeed, Poirot replied, pressing his fingertips together. We have a will that benefits from remaining unchanged, a blackmailer who knew everyone's secrets, and a businessman hired to investigate murder. Each person reveals enough truth to appear honest while concealing what truly matters. But observe, Hastings, someone in that dining room possessed both the knowledge to poison Lady Pemberton's specific glass and the medical expertise to ensure the dosage was precisely lethal. Our
Soon
next interview may
we
prove
shall
most
see
illuminating
the
indeed.
high and mighty
The fog pressed
falling.
against the windows like grasping fingers, and somewhere in the palazzo's depths, a clock chimed the half-hour. The game of cat and mouse continued, with Hercule Poirot methodically separating truth from carefully constructed lies. Dr. Marcus Chen entered the library with the quiet assurance of a man accustomed to life
Constance
and
wants
death
me
decisions.
hanged.
His dark suit was impeccably pressed, his movements economical and precise. Unlike the previous suspects who had displayed varying degrees of nervousness or theatrical behavior, the physician settled into his chair with professional composure. Dr. Chen, Poirot began, his voice carrying respectful formality. You attended Sir Malcolm Pemberton during his final illness 2 years ago. What was your diagnosis? Acute myocardial infarction, Chen replied without hesitation. His heart simply stopped. There were no prior symptoms, which
This city
initially
runs on
troubled me.
smoke and
But
mirrors,
sudden cardiac
Inspector.
death occurs even
And
in
yet,
apparently healthy
truth has a
individuals.
way of cutting
The
through the
autopsy
haze.
confirmed my findings completely.
Take
Yet
a good
tonight,
look.
Lady Pemberton claimed to
Every
possess
last one of
evidence
them is a
suggesting her husband was
masterpiece of
murdered.
forgery.
Did she share these suspicions with
So,
you?
Mr. Marsden,
A muscle
let
in
us
Chen's
discuss
jaw
the crimson
tightened,
letter.
almost imperceptibly. So she contacted me last week with increasingly wild accusations. She had found correspondence suggesting Sir Malcolm intended to divorce her and remarry. She became convinced he had been murdered to prevent this and demanded I support her theory. And medically, Doctor, would such a murder be possible? Chen's response was clinically precise. With certain cardiac stimulants interacting with an existing heart condition,
I
yes,
swear I didn't
it
mean
could
to do
mimic
it.
natural
it was an
failure
accident, you must
perfectly.
believe me.
But I found no evidence of such intervention during my examination or the subsequent autopsy. Poirot leaned forward with sudden interest. You are a man of science, Doctor. You understand both poisons and their administration. Could you, had you wished, have killed Lady Pemberton tonight without difficulty? Yes, Chen answered without flinching. Any competent physician could have. But consider this logically. If I had murdered Sir Malcolm, would I have performed an autopsy that could expose my crime? Would I not simply have certified natural causes and avoided all scrutiny? A compelling point. What did you observe during the blackout?
Mon
Professional
Dieu.
instinct took over.
Lady
I remained
Constance's
seated,
dress.
listening for signs
killer
of
must have
distress.
torn it during the
I heard
struggle.
deliberate movement behind me. Footsteps, quite purposeful. Someone who knew exactly where they were going despite the complete darkness. Then came Lady
think you know the
Pemberton's
truth,
gasp,
but you don't.
and I moved
I
immediately
won't
toward
let
her
you
position,
ruin me based
though
on
too late
speculation.
to intervene.
I am an innocent man.
These footsteps, could you identify their owner? Heavy enough to be masculine, yet light enough to suggest someone who moves with practiced
You see, I
stealth.
couldn't let them find it.
Not the Count's arrogant stride.
I burned the
I nor the
secondary
American's
letter
aggressive
myself.
pace. Someone more careful, more
Honor.
deliberate.
Sir Roderick.
When Chen departed,
a
Professor
heavy chain.
Edmund Blackwood entered with academic dignity, his weathered face composed despite the late hour. He arranged his evening jacket with careful precision, as though preparing for a lecture rather than interrogation. Professor, Poirot began, you are an expert in Renaissance artifacts. Your relationship with Lady Pemberton was
Should never
purely
have come
professional.
Back here. You know too much.
Academic
Please let me
collaboration.
explain. It wasn't
Blackwood
my
corrected.
fault.
His
She's
Oxford
lying.
accent
Get rid of
crisp.
her.
She funded several of
I'm
my
afraid
excavations.
Philip is a married
we shared
man,
a passion
Lady
for
Constance.
historical preservation,
He committed
though we
bigamy when he
disagreed
married your
fundamentally
sister.
about methodology. How so? A shadow crossed the professor's features. Venetia believed her wealth entitled her to possess whatever caught her fancy, regardless of legal niceties or ethical considerations. Several pieces in her collection should rightfully be in museums, not private hands. I threatened repeatedly to report her to the authorities. You disapproved of her methods? Vehemently. She was destroying the very history she claimed to love. But she held my funding hostage, threatening to withdraw support for my excavation in Petra unless I authenticated questionable pieces for her collection. During the blackout, what did you observe? I was seated near the table's center. I heard the distinct sound of glass touching porcelain, someone setting down a vessel with deliberate care. Then rapid breathing, almost a gasp, followed by that terrible thud. The bitter almond scent was unmistakable to anyone with chemical knowledge. You studied chemistry? Before specializing in art history, which I freely acknowledge, provides me with both motive and means for tonight's crime. After Blackwood's departure, Poirot turned to Commissario Bellini with thoughtful precision. Observe, my friend, how each suspect provides just enough truth to appear cooperative while concealing vital details. Yet something troubles me greatly about the poison itself. The cyanide acted quickly, Bellini noted. Too quickly, and yet not quickly enough, Poirot murmured, his green eyes gleaming with sudden insight. Lady Pemberton survived long enough to make that choking sound several witnesses described. But either the dose was miscalculated, unlikely for someone with chemical expertise, or the poison was administered in a form designed to delay slightly. This suggests our killer wanted her to die at a precise moment, not merely during dinner. The fog pressed against the windows like grasping fingers, and Poirot's little gray cells continued their methodical work of separating truth from deception. The palazzo's ancient clock chimed 2 in the morning as Poirot dismissed the last of the household staff. He remained in the library, his fingers steepled beneath his chin, his green eyes reflecting the lamplight with an intensity that spoke of his little gray cells working at their highest capacity. "Hastings," he said suddenly, breaking the contemplative silence. "You observed the dinner service carefully, did you not?" I frowned, reconstructing the elegant meal in my memory. "Well, yes, I suppose so. The crystal was magnificent, the silver antique, the service impeccable. And Lady Pemberton's wine glass. Did anything strike you as unusual?" "Now that you mention it, yes. She sent her glass back during the final course, claiming it had a water spot. Rather particular of her, I thought, given the circumstances." "Exactement." Poirot's mustaches bristled with satisfaction. "And who delivered the replacement glass?" "One of the footmen, I believe. The lighting was rather atmospheric, and I wasn't paying particular attention to the service." Poirot rose abruptly,
Look here,
his
mademoiselle.
movements
The
charged with
dates do
sudden
not
purpose.
align.
But someone
Thomas
was paying
moved
very
away
close
shortly
attention
after
indeed,
his
mon
sister's
ami.
death.
As someone who knew that Lady Pemberton's fastidiousness about glassware would provide the perfect opportunity for murder. We made our way to the kitchen, where the head butler, Giovanni, waited with the patient dignity of a man who had served the aristocracy for decades. His grief for his late employer was evident in the way his shoulders sagged, though his professional composure
But why would he
remained
leave the window
intact.
open, Miss Marple?
The replacement glass, Signor Giovanni, Poirot inquired with gentle authority. "Tell me exactly how it was prepared." "I selected a fresh glass from the sideboard myself, monsieur," Giovanni replied carefully. "When Lady Pemberton expressed displeasure, I personally poured wine from the same bottle used for all guests.
So,
the
the
same
great
vintage,
Poirot finally
the
shows
same
his
bottle.
true
There could
colours.
be no difference.
I presume you found what you were
And
looking
after
for
you
in my
poured the
absence.
wine, but before you
You see,
delivered it to the
Inspector,
table?"
The real nephew died
Giovanni's
years
weathered
ago.
brow furrowed
This
with
man is
concentration.
an imposter and a
I was
killer.
called away briefly. One of the gondoliers had urgent news about the fog affecting tomorrow's deliveries. When I returned, perhaps 30 seconds later, the glass
One of you in
remained
this room tonight
exactly
is a
where I
murderer.
had left it on the sideboard. 30 seconds, Poirot murmured,
You
his
sought to
voice
hide your
carrying the weight
past,
of
did you not?
significance. Time enough for someone with swift hands and steady nerves to add a lethal
There's no
dose
use
to a
denying it now.
specific glass.
The serum
And
wasn't
who,
stable.
Signor Giovanni,
I let ambition
had
cloud my
access to
judgment,
that
now she's
sideboard
gone.
during those crucial 30 seconds. Anyone in the dining room, monsieur? The sideboard stands near the doorway to the kitchen, accessible to all the guests without appearing suspicious. Back in the library, Poirot requested that Commissario Bellini arrange for all the suspect's personal effects to be brought for examination. "We must be methodical," he explained. "The truth often lies not in grand gestures, but in small, overlooked details." The items were spread across the massive desk like pieces of an intricate puzzle. Count Moretti's possessions included an ornate cigarette case, a monogrammed gold lighter, and several gambling chips from the Casino di Venezia. Most telling was a crumpled telegram that Poirot smoothed with careful fingers. Final demand. Payment required immediately. Consequences imminent. Rossini. Desperate debts breed desperate measures, Poirot observed quietly. A man facing ruin might risk everything on a single audacious gamble. Mr. Thornton's briefcase yielded the unsigned codicil to Lady Pemberton's will, along with correspondence revealing his own precarious financial situation. His practice depends almost entirely on Lady Pemberton's patronage, Poirot noted. Her death eliminates his primary source of income, unless he stood to benefit in some other manner we have not yet discovered. Professor Blackwood's pockets contained archaeological tools, scholarly correspondence, and most intriguingly, a small vial of chemical testing solutions. The professor's expertise with dangerous substances is well documented, Bellini observed. Dr. Chen's medical bag held the expected instruments and medications, including several compounds that could prove lethal in improper doses. The good doctor possessed both the knowledge and the means, Poirot murmured thoughtfully. James Rutherford's belongings included his distinctive silver Zippo lighter and, most surprisingly, a preliminary report from a private investigator. Poirot read this document with intense interest, his eyebrows rising significantly. "How very illuminating," he said softly. It appears our American businessman had already begun investigating Lady Pemberton's suspicions about her husband's death, and what he discovered provides several people in this room
The seal
with
is
compelling
most
reasons to
peculiar.
ensure she never shared
A
her
forgery,
knowledge.
perhaps, or
Madame
merely a
Volkoff's
clever
evening
distraction.
bag contained the usual feminine accessories, cosmetics, and a small mother-of-pearl pistol. Our Russian princess came prepared for various contingencies, Poirot observed dryly. As dawn began to break over Venice's ancient waters, Poirot gathered the evidence with methodical precision. "The pattern emerges, mes amis," he announced to Bellini and myself. "We have a victim who possessed dangerous knowledge, a gathering of people each harboring secrets, and a murder committed with surgical precision
Edmund Valement's
at the
death.
exact moment
The
when
more I examine
revelation
the
would
facts,
have
the
been
deeper the
most
shadows seem to
damaging."
grow. It is a mystery.
"But which of them
wrapped
is
in a
our
shroud.
killer?" Bellini asked
We depart for
impatiently.
Berkshire immediately.
Poirot's smile was
See to
enigmatic.
the luggage yourself, George.
Patience,
I
Commissario.
want no mistakes.
The truth
This
will
case is
reveal
far too
itself, but
important.
only when all the pieces are properly arranged. For now, I suggest we allow our suspects to believe they have successfully deceived us. Sometimes the greatest revelations come from those who think they are safe. The fog had lifted from the Grand Canal, but within the Palazzo Rossetti, the mists of deception still swirled thick and treacherous around a truth that only Hercule Poirot's methodical mind was beginning to illuminate. The pale morning light filtering through the palazzo's Gothic windows cast long shadows across the breakfast room, where the assembled company sat in uncomfortable silence. The events of the previous evening had stripped away the veneer of social politeness, leaving raw nerves and barely concealed suspicions in its wake. Poirot entered with his characteristic precision, his appearance immaculate, despite the early hour. He surveyed the gathering with those penetrating green eyes, noting every detail. Clarissa's red-rimmed eyes, Count Moretti's restless fidgeting, Professor Blackwood's studied nonchalance, Dr. Chen's professional composure that seemed slightly forced, Madame Volkoff's theatrical manner subdued by genuine anxiety, Mr. Thornton's nervous trembling, and James Rutherford's aggressive impatience. "Said ladies and gentlemen," Poirot announced, settling himself with deliberate ceremony. "I have spent the early hours in most illuminating correspondence with various authorities. The fog of confusion begins to lift, revealing connections that were previously obscured." He produced a telegram from his pocket with theatrical precision. "This morning, I received confirmation from Dr. Antonio Marchetti's former colleagues in Florence regarding the autopsy performed on Sir Malcolm Pemberton 2 years ago." The room became deathly still. Dr. Chen's coffee cup paused halfway to his lips. "Dr. Marchetti, you see, died 6 months ago." Poirot continued conversationally. His estate included all his professional
I'm afraid,
records,
Monsieur
which his
Poirot.
successor was kind enough to
Terribly
examine at
afraid.
my request.
You
Most
must help
interesting.
me.
The handwriting analysis reveals that the autopsy report in Lady Pemberton's files, the one certifying natural causes, bears a forged signature. The reaction was
A
immediate
letter written
and
by your
electric.
husband?
Clarissa gasped, her hand flying to her throat. Count Moretti half
letter
rose
was
from his
kept in a
chair.
safe in the
Professor
library.
Blackwood's newspaper crumpled in his suddenly tightened grip. That's impossible, Dr. Chen said
Devastating
quietly,
would be a
though
more
his voice
accurate
carried a
word.
tremor that hadn't been there before. I witnessed the autopsy
5 years
myself.
ago, Sir Edmund died in this
Did
library.
you, Doctor?
The official
or did you
cause
witness
was
a
a fall,
cursory examination
but I've always
designed to
wondered what
support a
pushed him.
predetermined
Of her
conclusion?
husband Deem is murder.
Poirot's voice remained gentle, but his eyes were steel. Tell me, well, what would happen if someone with medical knowledge administered a cardiac stimulant to a man with undiagnosed heart disease? It would trigger fatal arrhythmia, Chen admitted reluctantly. The symptoms would be indistinguishable from natural cardiac arrest unless one specifically tested for the drug. And such testing would only occur if there were suspicion of foul play. Suspicion that would never arise if the attending physician certified natural death and arranged for a compliant pathologist to perform a superficial autopsy.
Police.
Commissario
If this
Bellini
came out,
leaned
the
forward
scandal
with
would destroy
intense
too
interest.
many innocent people.
You're suggesting Sir Malcolm was murdered
What
and the
has
evidence was
changed?
systematically concealed? I am stating facts, Commissario. Lady Pemberton discovered these irregularities through
concerns
her own
Olivia
investigation.
Ashton, my
See,
husband's
she had
secretary.
obtained Sir Malcolm's complete
There
medical
was
records from his London physician
unpleasantness.
and compared them with the official
Tell me,
autopsy
Lady
report.
Constance.
The discrepancies
read
were
the letter?
significant enough to convince her that her husband had been murdered. Mr. Thornton's voice was barely a
Every
whisper.
terrible, unforgivable
She told me she had
word.
proof. Absolute proof. That's why she wanted to
I'm
change
afraid
her
these
will
figures don't
immediately.
lie, Geoffrey.
She said she couldn't bear
appears
to leave
you've
her
been
fortune
cooking
to
the
someone
books.
who might be
You
connected
can't
to
pin
Malcolm's
this on me,
death.
Constance. This is
But
Philip
which
as
connection?
I choose to remember
Poirot
him.
mused,
Before the
beginning his
disgrace.
characteristic pacing.
Before he became the wastrel
The
he is
physician who
today.
certified the death, the
is a
academic who had been
liaison in the
arguing with Sir
household.
Malcolm about funding, the solicitor who handled the estate,
betrayal.
the Russian emigre whose
Were
background
you
Sir
yourself
Malcolm had been
implicated, Lady
investigating,
Constance?
or perhaps
How
someone
dare
closer to home.
That is an
His
outrageous
gaze
suggestion.
settled on Clarissa, who shrank back as if physically struck. Your uncle was a methodical man, mademoiselle. In his final weeks, he made several trips to London, consulted with different solicitors, made inquiries about divorce proceedings. Why would a happily married man contemplate such drastic changes to his life? I don't know, she whispered. He seemed troubled, distracted, but he never spoke to me about personal matters. Yet someone knew of his intentions. Someone who realized that Sir Malcolm's divorce would expose secrets that could not bear scrutiny. Someone who possessed both the medical knowledge to simulate heart failure and the connections to arrange a falsified autopsy. Professor Blackwood set down his crumpled newspaper with deliberate care. You're painting a picture of elaborate conspiracy, Poirot. Surely Occam's razor suggests a simpler explanation. On the contrary, Professor, the simplest explanation is often the most complex when viewed from the inside. Consider, Lady Pemberton gathered you all here not for a social evening, but for a carefully orchestrated revelation. She intended to name her husband's killer publicly, with witnesses present
This
to
rose,
ensure
Lady
justice was
Constance.
served.
It
But
holds
someone
the key
realized
to
her
the
intentions,
secrets we have
Madame
uncovered.
Volkoff said slowly, her accent thickening with stress. Someone who attended this dinner knowing they would be exposed. Precisely, and that someone came prepared with cyanide, not a weapon of opportunity, but a carefully planned instrument of silence. The theatrical
silence
timing of her
speaks
death,
volumes,
cutting off her
Chambers.
revelation at
Why
the
did you
crucial
lie
moment.
about the key?
It tells us much
We
about our
both
killer's
know the
psychology.
truth.
Poirot stopped
They are
pacing
placed
and
beneath
faced
my
the group
pillow
directly.
each night.
This was not a
Routinely.
crime of passion, mes amis. It was the desperate act
Chambers
of someone
mentions
whose
Timothy
carefully
Ashford
constructed
visiting
life
in July.
was about to crumble. Someone who had killed once to preserve their secrets and was prepared to kill again for the same reason. The silence stretched taut as a wire. Every face reflected a mixture of fear, guilt, and calculation. But here is what troubles me most, Poirot continued, his voice dropping to
I have
barely
been a
above a whisper.
blind,
The killer made
trusting
one crucial
fool.
error. They assumed that in the chaos following Lady Pemberton's death, certain evidence would remain hidden. They were wrong. He produced a small leather portfolio from his jacket.
You seem
This
preoccupied
morning,
tonight, my
while
lady.
searching Lady
Does the
Pemberton's
caviar
private
not agree
study,
with you, or is it something
I
more
discovered
pressing?
something
I find
most
it hard to
illuminating
stomach
hidden
pleasantries when a
behind a
killer walks
false
free.
panel in her escritoire.
She was
Documents
my
that she had
husband's
carefully
mistress.
preserved as insurance, including the original unforged autopsy report that Dr. Marchetti actually prepared. The color drained from several faces around the table. The true report
£500,
indicates the
Olivia.
presence of
It's more than
digitalis in
generous
Sir
for your
Malcolm's
silence on the
system,
matter.
a cardiac
I expect
stimulant
you to be gone
that,
by
when
morning.
administered to
Monsieur
someone with his
Roderick,
particular
your
heart
attachment
condition,
to Miss
would
Olivia is
cause
quite profound,
immediate
is it
and
not?
fatal
love her.
arrhythmia. Most
I don't care
interesting,
what they
it also
say.
notes evidence of
And
recent
here,
injection
amongst
sites,
the silver,
suggesting
the
the drug
truth
was
begins
administered
to
shortly
gleam.
before death. Dr. Chen's professional composure finally cracked. Even if that were true, it proves nothing. Digitalis is used therapeutically. Any physician might have administered it in good faith. Indeed, doctor. But not every physician would have had the foresight to arrange for the report to be suppressed and replaced with a forgery. That required planning, connections, and intimate knowledge of forensic procedures. Poirot's green eyes swept the assembled suspects once more. Our killer is methodical, knowledgeable, and utterly ruthless. They have killed twice to protect their secret, and I suspect they would kill again if cornered. But they have made one fatal error. They have underestimated the power of truth to surface, no matter
I'm
how
asking you
deeply
one
it is
last time,
buried.
Poirot. What
The ancient
exactly do you
palazzo
want
seemed to
from
hold
me?
its breath
Spit it
as
out!
Hercule Poirot prepared to spring his trap. Commissario Bellini recovered first from the collective shock, his chair scraping harshly against the marble floor. So his weathered face had hardened into professional resolve as he fixed his gaze on Dr. Chen with unmistakable accusation. Doctor, Bellini announced with clipped
Edmund
authority,
and I
you were Sir Malcolm's
were
attending
never
physician.
close.
You certified his death, possessed the necessary medical knowledge, and had access to cardiac medications. The evidence points directly to you as our murderer.
I have nothing
The
to
room fell
hide.
into tense silence, all eyes turning to Chen. His composed facade finally cracked, revealing the strain beneath his professional demeanor.
We know
Only
about
the
the
slight
stolen
whitening
letter,
of his
Philip.
knuckles as he gripped his coffee cup betrayed the pressure building within him.
Olivia
If you intend
Ashton
to
had
arrest
the
me,
most to lose.
Chen replied quietly, his voice
She knew
steady
all
despite
the
the
secrets.
circumstances.
She's
I will
calculating,
cooperate fully.
strategic.
However,
Everything she does
imprisoning
is
the
for her own
most
advancement.
obvious
Pure
suspect may
ambition
satisfy
masked
public
as devotion.
demand for justice,
Let us
Commissario,
discuss Timothy
but it will
Ashford.
not satisfy the demands of truth.
What did he want when he
Your
visited
protests
you
are
that
convenient,
evening?
Doctor. Bellini pressed forward
So I profited
relentlessly.
from their mistakes.
You
It
benefited
wasn't
from
clean,
both
but neither
victims'
is this
trust,
city.
Sir
I
Malcolm's
regret
medical
nothing,
dependence,
understand me.
and Lady
Nothing.
Pemberton's continued patronage after his death. A grateful widow, ongoing professional fees, influence within Venice's social circles. Forgive the interruption, Commissario. Poirot interjected with characteristic gentleness, though his green eyes gleamed with sudden intensity. But that reasoning makes Dr. Chen a most unlikely murderer indeed. Both men turned toward him with surprise. Poirot adjusted his position slightly, as though gaining better perspective on an intricate puzzle. Consider carefully, mes amis, he continued thoughtfully. Oh, if Dr. Chen had engineered Sir Malcolm's murder for personal gain,
You seem
would he not have
preoccupied with
ensured
my
no
cellar,
trail of
Inspector.
suspicion
Merely
remain?
admiring the collection,
Instead,
Sir
what
Roderick.
discoveries do we make?
Though I find
A
some
clumsily
volumes
forged
more revealing
autopsy
than
report,
others.
easily detected by a determined widow. Digitalis traces left in the body
My mother
rather
is
than eliminated.
prone to
Evidence
flights
not
of
erased,
fancy.
but merely obscured. The work of someone unfamiliar
Shall we
with proper
discuss the
medical
matter of the
procedures.
stolen letter, then?
Perhaps a bungled cover-up, Bellini suggested,
We know
though
you were
his
the last one
conviction
in the
wavered
vault,
slightly.
Roderick. Where is the
Or
money?
deliberate misdirection by
swear I
someone
don't know what
lacking
you're
medical
talking about.
expertise,
I didn't take
Poirot
anything.
countered.
This rain.
Someone who believed arranging a
feels
superficial
like a
autopsy
warning.
and forging a signature would suffice, without understanding the comprehensive records a true physician must
You cannot
maintain.
dictate my life any longer.
At that
If I
precise
choose to
moment,
marry her,
commotion
I will, and neither
erupted
you
from
nor
the
your
entrance
money will
hall.
stop me.
Raised
We need to
voices
discuss
echoed
Timothy
through the
Ashford.
palazzo's stone corridors, followed by rapid footsteps on marble.
I have
A
nothing
young
to say
woman
about
burst
him.
into the breakfast room,
Look
her
closely.
traveling clothes
The seal
disheveled,
is here,
her
yes,
face
but
flushed
this
with
tiny
exertion
smudge of
and
wax tells us
desperate
everything
urgency.
we need to know.
Where is Lady Pemberton? She demanded breathlessly. her dark eyes scanning the assembled faces. "I received her telegram yesterday. I came immediately from Rome, as she requested." Clarissa rose unsteadily, her face draining of color. "Isabella, what are you doing here?" The newcomer was perhaps 30, with intelligent features and the bearing of someone accustomed to professional authority. Her confusion deepened as she absorbed the shocked expressions surrounding her. "I am Dr. Isabella Moretti," she announced, her English precise, despite her accent. "Lady Pemberton summoned me urgently. I claiming she possessed evidence regarding my brother's death. She said it was literally a matter of life and death." Count Alessandro shot to his feet, his chair clattering backward. "Isabella, you're supposed to be in South America. You've been gone for 3 years." "I returned to Rome last month," she replied, her gaze fixed on her brother with an expression
think I
mixing
regret
affection
leaving him,
and
Inspector.
growing suspicion.
But
"I've
some
been working with
shadows are
Doctors
very
Without
long.
Borders, but Lady Pemberton's telegram was so
can't keep
specific
this
in its
from you any
accusations
longer.
that I had no choice
It's
but
true.
to come immediately."
I've been seeing him.
Poirot stepped forward with electrifying interest,
Honor is
his
a
entire
dangerous
demeanor
thing, M.
transformed
Poirot.
by this unexpected development. "Dr. Moretti, this brother you mention, someone other than Count Alessandro?" "My younger brother Paolo," she answered, her voice catching with suppressed emotion. "No, he died 3 years ago in what authorities classified as a boating accident on Lake Como. But I never believed it was accidental.
these ledgers
Paolo
confirm
was an
the
expert
discrepancies
sailor.
we discussed,
The
Mr.
waters were
Marsden.
calm that evening, and there were
Bailman
too many
House.
unexplained
Now I
inconsistencies in
see
the
it
official
clearly.
investigation.
The missing piece was right in
And
front of me
Lady
the entire
Pemberton
time.
contacted you regarding this death?
One of you in this very
Isabella
room
produced
is
a
guilty
crumpled
of this
telegram
heinous
from her
crime.
traveling bag.
The evidence, I
She
assure you,
claimed to have
is
discovered evidence
irrefutable.
proving Paolo was murdered,
Perhaps
and
murdered.
that his death connected
It was not
directly
a
to Sir
fall.
Malcolm Pemberton's death. She insisted the same person was responsible for both
You
crimes,
took the letter to
and that she
protect your
could prove
father's
it
memory, did
conclusively.
you not?
The revelation sent shockwaves through the assembled company like a physical blow.
I couldn't let the truth
Professor
come out about
Blackwood's
the
face
affair.
turned ashen.
I tried to bury
Madame
it,
Volkoff
Father.
clutched her pearls
It was
with
misguided
white-knuckled
loyalty, I know
desperation.
that now.
The
Mister!
murder was separate.
Thornton appeared on the verge of complete collapse. 3 deaths, Poirot murmured, his voice carrying the weight of terrible understanding. Not 2 murders, but 3. And now Lady Pemberton makes 4 victims. The pattern becomes devastatingly clear, does it not? Isabella's eyes filled with tears as she continued, her professional composure cracking under emotional strain. Paolo was a medical researcher specializing in cardiac medications. In the weeks before his death, he became increasingly agitated, claiming he had discovered evidence of his research being stolen and misused for purposes he never intended. He planned to report it to authorities, but then he conveniently died in a boating accident. Poirot finished softly, his little gray cells working with mechanical precision. An accident that eliminated a troublesome witness and buried dangerous knowledge forever. Tell me, Dottoressa, did your brother maintain detailed research records?
I don't know how to
He
thank
was
you,
obsessively
Monsieur Poirot.
meticulous about documentation.
You've given us a chance
but after
at
his death,
peace.
his apartment was ransacked. Police dismissed it as simple burglary, yet nothing valuable was stolen except his research journals and computer files. Poirot's voice carried the finality of judgment as he addressed the assembled suspects. We now see the complete picture, mes amis. Paolo Moretti discovered his cardiac research was being stolen and weaponized. When he threatened exposure, he was murdered and his evidence destroyed. But he had already shared concerns with Sir Malcolm, who began his own investigation. When Sir Malcolm approached the truth, he was eliminated using the very compounds Paolo had been researching. And Lady Pemberton, piecing together these connections through her own investigation, had to be silenced before she could expose the killer publicly. The ancient palazzo seemed to hold its breath, its stone walls bearing witness to a truth finally emerging from shadows of deception and death. The revelation of Paolo Moretti's murder sent shockwaves through the breakfast room like ripples across still water. Isabella's presence had transformed what seemed a single crime into a calculated campaign of elimination
But I told you,
spanning 3
I lost my
years.
ticket.
The assembled
must believe
suspects
me, I need to
sat
leave
in
tonight.
stunned silence, each face reflecting the
She was
terrible
terrified,
realization
begging
that they
me
were
not to go
trapped
to the
with
police.
someone who had killed
But I had to
repeatedly
tell
and
someone.
would kill
I
again
had to tell
if
you.
cornered.
Look, over there.
Poirot
That is
stood
where
at the
I saw
room
him
center,
standing just before the
his
whistle
small
blew.
figure
The timing is
radiating
crucial,
authority
madame.
as his
Crucial.
green eyes moved methodically from face to face. The morning light streaming through the Gothic windows illuminated every expression, every nervous gesture, every telltale sign of guilt or innocence that his trained observation catalogued with scientific precision.
You have not accounted for your
The pattern
movements
becomes
between 10
clear,
and
mes
midnight.
amis,
I
he
was
announced
alone.
with quiet certainty.
Why must you persist
We
with these
have
dreadful
before us
accusations?
not a crime of passion, but a methodical elimination of witnesses. Someone in this room has committed murder 3 times, each death designed to protect a secret that grows more dangerous with each passing year. Mr. Thornton suddenly lurched to his feet, his thin frame trembling with barely contained hysteria. His professional composure had finally cracked under the mounting pressure, revealing the desperate man beneath the solicitor's facade. "I cannot bear this any longer," he burst out, his voice cracking with strain.
Smoke.
Lady Pemberton discovered
Are you trying
everything.
to hide
The
something,
embezzlement,
or merely
the
escape it?
falsified accounts, the money I've been stealing from the estate for years. Sir Malcolm had begun to suspect, was planning a complete audit of all financial records. When he died, I thought my secret was safe, but she found the discrepancies last month. Commissario Bellini reached for his handcuffs with grim satisfaction. "So you poisoned her to prevent exposure?" "No." Thornton's denial came out as a desperate wail. "I'm a thief, not a murderer. Yes, I had every
Where were
motive
you
to
at 10
want her
o'clock,
dead,
Mrs. Hillman?
but I lack the courage
told
for
you I
such
was in my
direct
room.
action.
I didn't see
I steal
anything, I
with
swear.
paperwork and legal manipulation.
Martine.
Not poison and
But
violence.
if this is true, sir,
Poirot studied
then
the
you
solicitor
are
with
guilty
penetrating
of bigamy.
intensity, his little gray cells processing this confession with characteristic precision. "Your admission is noted, Monsieur Thornton, but I believe you speak truth about
regarding the
murder.
fortune.
Your
It was
crimes
not
are
chance,
financial,
Inspector,
not
but a
homicidal.
meticulous deception.
However, your
I simply
embezzlement
applied my
provides
little grey
crucial
cells to the
context.
curious case of the
It would have
missing
been
heir.
exposed
Put your hands
by the
behind your
very
back.
audit that Sir Malcolm planned, would it
All
not?
right, let's go. Move it.
Yes, Thornton whispered miserably. And not just my theft. The audit would have revealed other irregularities, inflated medical bills, suspicious consulting fees, payments for services never actually rendered. All eyes turned toward Dr. Chen, who remained unnaturally still despite the mounting accusations swirling around him like a gathering storm. The medical bills were indeed falsified, Chen admitted quietly, his professional mask finally showing cracks. But not by me. I discovered the fraud months after Sir Malcolm's death when reconciling my practice accounts. Someone had been submitting invoices under my name, collecting payments for treatments never administered. When I tried to investigate, I was threatened with exposure as Sir Malcolm's murderer if I reported the financial irregularities. Isabella Moretti's voice cut through the tension with surgical precision. My brother's final email mentioned his research assistant, someone who had begun asking disturbing questions about lethal dosages and undetectable administration methods. Someone who had recently suffered severe financial losses and seemed desperately anxious about money. "Gambling debts?" Poirot repeated meaningfully, with his gaze settling on Professor Blackwood with laser intensity. "The same affliction that has plagued you for years, Professor. The same desperate need for funds that drove you to authenticate questionable artifacts for Lady Pemberton's collection, compromising your professional ethics for financial gain." Professor Blackwood's weathered face had gone pale as ancient parchment. His hands trembled as he set down his coffee cup, the porcelain rattling against the saucer with nervous energy. "You specialized in art history," Poirot continued relentlessly. "But your early career included biochemistry research. 3 years ago, you spent time in Italy cataloging artifacts, coincidentally in the same city where Paolo Moretti conducted his cardiac research. You were his research assistant, or were you not?" "Circumstantial evidence proves nothing," Blackwood protested, though his voice lacked conviction. "Then let us add substance to circumstance," Poirot replied. producing a small leather portfolio
threatened
from his
me.
jacket. Lady Pemberton's hidden
I
files
cannot let
contained
this continue.
correspondence from Paolo, expressing concerns about someone asking inappropriate questions about his research. Someone whose gambling debts had become desperate enough to consider selling medical secrets to the highest bidder. The professor's composure finally shattered completely. His shoulders sagged, his carefully maintained facade crumbling like ancient ruins, finally surrendering to time's inexorable pressure. "You cannot prove any of this," he whispered, but the words carried no conviction, only the hollow echo of a man watching his world collapse around him. Poirot's smile was enigmatic, yet terrible. "We shall see, Professor. We shall see indeed." The breakfast room had become a theater of accusation, with Professor Blackwood occupying center stage as the assembled company waited for his inevitable confession. The weight of evidence seemed insurmountable. His connection to Paolo Moretti, his desperate gambling debts, his expertise with chemical compounds, and most damning of all,
Soon
his presence
we shall
at
see
each
the
crucial
high
moment
and
when
mighty
death had struck.
falling.
Commissario Bellini reached for his handcuffs with the satisfaction of a man who believed justice was finally within reach. "Professor Edmund Blackwood," he announced formally, "you are under arrest for the murders of Paolo Moretti, Sir Malcolm Pemberton, and Lady Venetia Pemberton." But Hercule
Constance
Poirot
wants me
raised one
hanged.
small, perfectly manicured hand in a gesture that commanded immediate silence. His green eyes held that familiar gleam that I had learned to recognize over our years of partnership, the look of a master detective who had just perceived a fatal flaw in what appeared to be an airtight case. "Non, non, non, commissario," he said softly, his voice carrying absolute certainty despite its gentle tone. "This will not do at all. Professor Blackwood is indeed guilty of many transgressions: academic fraud, ethical compromise,
city runs on
financial
smoke and
desperation
mirrors,
that led him
Inspector.
to authenticate
And yet,
questionable
the truth
artifacts
has a way of
and
cutting through
compromise
the
his
haze.
scholarly integrity. But he is not
Take a
our
good look.
murderer."
Every
The statement
last
struck
one
the
of them
room
is
like a
masterpiece
thunderbolt.
of forgery.
Professor Blackwood himself looked up
So,
with a
Mr.
mixture of
Marsden,
surprise and
let us
bitter
discuss the
disappointment,
Crimson Letter.
as though he had almost welcomed the prospect of finally paying for his sins. "But the evidence," Bellini protested, gesturing at the documents spread across the breakfast table. "His connection to Paolo Moretti, his gambling debts, his access to the research, the chemical residue on his clothing. All circumstantial, and some of it deliberately planted to mislead us," Poirot replied, beginning his characteristic pacing with measured
I
steps that
swear I
echoed
didn't mean
against
to
the
do
marble
it.
floor.
It was an accident, you must believe
But
me.
most crucially, Commissario, Professor Blackwood possessed an unshakable alibi for Paolo Moretti's death 3 years ago. He produced a telegram from his jacket with theatrical precision. "This morning, while you all slept, I contacted the University of Oxford's archaeological department. Professor Blackwood was not in Italy when Paolo died, but in Egypt, leading a major excavation. He was photographed at the dig site on the very day of Paolo's drowning, surrounded by dozens of witnesses, including international journalists covering the discovery." Isabella Moretti gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Then who?" "Patience, Dottoressa," Poirot continued,
Mon Dieu.
his voice carrying the
Lady
weight of
Constance's
terrible
dress.
revelation.
The killer must have
The
torn
answer
it
lies
during
not
the
in
struggle.
academic colleagues or business associates, but much closer to home. Our killer is someone who possessed intimate knowledge of Paolo's research, because they shared his blood,
think you know the
his
truth,
trust,
but you don't.
and his laboratory
I won't
access.
let you ruin me based on
His gaze
speculation.
moved
I am
deliberately
an
around the
innocent
room
man.
before settling with laser intensity on Count Alessandro Moretti, who had remained conspicuously silent throughout the morning's dramatic revelations.
You see, I couldn't let
Count
them find it.
Alessandro, Poirot announced
I
quietly.
burned the
Now
secondary
you have
letter
displayed
myself.
remarkable composure for a man supposedly learning
Honor,
of his brother's
Sir
murder for the
Roderick,
first time.
can be a
Your
heavy
silence
chain.
speaks not of grief, but of guilty knowledge. The Count's handsome features remained carefully composed, though a muscle twitched almost imperceptibly along his aristocratic jawline. "Grief affects people differently, Monsieur Poirot. Some of us prefer dignified restraint. to theatrical displays of emotion.
You should never have come back here.
Indeed,
You know too much.
but your restraint
let me
conceals
explain. It
knowledge
wasn't my
rather
fault.
than sorrow.
She's lying.
Poirot
Get rid of
replied
her.
with relentless precision.
I'm afraid Philip is
You
a
knew
married
Paolo
man,
was
Lady
murdered
Constance.
because you killed him yourself.
He committed bigamy
not for
when he married
academic
your
secrets
sister.
or research data, but for something far more personal and infinitely more dangerous to your carefully constructed facade. The accusation hung in the air like poison gas. Clarissa released a strangled cry, on her face draining of all color as she stared at her fiancé with dawning horror. Isabella stood frozen, her medical training apparently insufficient to process this monstrous revelation about her own family. That's preposterous, Alessandro replied, though his voice carried a tremor that hadn't been there before. Paolo was my brother. I loved him. Why would I harm my own flesh and blood? Because he discovered your secret, Poirot continued with surgical precision. Not merely the gambling debts that everyone knew about, but your systematic theft of experimental cardiac medications from his laboratory. You were selling them on the black market to finance your addiction, and Paolo finally realized that his own brother was betraying his trust and corrupting his life's work. Isabella's voice was barely a whisper. Di Paolo told me someone was stealing from his lab. He was planning to report it, but he wanted absolute proof first to avoid destroying an innocent colleague's career. But the thief was no colleague, Poirot said grimly. It was his own brother, someone with unlimited access to his apartment, his research, his complete trust. When Paolo finally confronted you with evidence of your theft, you realized that exposure would mean not only imprisonment, but the complete destruction of your aristocratic reputation. So you killed him. You're constructing elaborate fiction, Alessandro protested, but sweat had begun to bead on his forehead, despite the palazzo's morning chill. Poirot produced another document with practiced efficiency. This bank transfer record shows 50,000 euros deposited into your account 2 days after Paolo's death. Payment from a pharmaceutical company later exposed for distributing counterfeit cardiac medications. The same experimental compounds your brother had been researching. The same substances later used to murder Sir Malcolm Pemberton when he began investigating pharmaceutical fraud through his charitable foundation. The silence that followed was absolute, broken
knows we're on
only
to
by
him.
the distant sound of water lapping
have to get the
against
letters before he
palazzo's
does.
ancient foundations. Every eye in the room fixed upon Count Alessandro Moretti, watching as his mask of nobility finally began to crack under the weight of revealed truth. When Sir Malcolm's investigation threatened to expose the stolen medication's source, Poirot continued remorselessly, that you used your knowledge of Paolo's research to eliminate him. A carefully calculated dose of cardiac stimulant administered to a man whose heart condition made him vulnerable to precisely that form of attack.
When the distraction
And when
would
Lady
occur.
Pemberton discovered evidence connecting her husband's death to Paolo's research, she too had to die. Alessandro's hand moved with desperate speed toward his jacket pocket, but Dr. Chen was faster, his medical reflexes seizing the Count's wrist with iron strength before any weapon could be drawn. It's over, Alessandro, Isabella said quietly, tears streaming down her face
Look here,
as she looked
mademoiselle.
at the brother
The
she had
dates
once
do not
idolized. No more lies.
Thomas moved
no more
away
death.
shortly after his sister's death.
For a long moment, the Count struggled against Chen's grip, his face contorted with rage and desperation. Then, slowly, or the fight drained from him like wine from a shattered glass, leaving only exhausted defeat in its wake. You cannot understand, he whispered, his aristocratic composure finally crumbling completely. The debts, the pressure,
But why
the
would he leave the
crushing
window
weight
open,
of a
Miss Marple?
name that meant
Perhaps
nothing
because
without
he
money to
intended for
support
us
it.
to believe he entered
Paolo
that
had
way,
everything,
Inspector.
talent, purpose, a brilliant future. I had only a title and obligations that were destroying me. So you destroyed him instead, Poirot stated with quiet finality. The ancient palazzo seemed to shudder with the weight of revealed truth, its stone
So, the
walls
great
bearing
Poirot
witness to the
finally shows
final
his true
unmasking of a
colours.
killer who had hidden
presume
behind
you found
nobility's
what you were looking
facade
for in my
while leaving a
absence.
trail of bodies
You
in his
see,
wake.
Inspector, the
But
real
even as
nephew
Commissario
died
Bellini
years
moved
ago.
to place
This
Alessandro
man
under
is an
arrest,
imposter
Hercule
and a
Poirot
killer.
remained perfectly still. his little gray cells continuing their methodical work. For in the depths of his brilliant mind, one final
One
piece
of you
the
in this
puzzle
room
had
tonight
yet to fall
is a
into
murderer.
place. A piece that would transform this already complex case into
sought to
something
hide your
even more
past, did you not?
extraordinary. Prepare the Grand Salon, if you please, Commissario, he said
There's no use
quietly.
denying it now.
For though we have
The serum
unmasked
wasn't
one
stable.
killer tonight,
I let ambition
suspect
cloud
the
my
complete
judgment,
truth
and now
may
she's
prove
gone.
even more remarkable than what we have already discovered. The Grand Salon of the Palazzo Rossetti had been transformed into a courtroom of fate, its Renaissance splendor providing an incongruous backdrop for the final act of this murderous drama. Heavy curtains were drawn back to admit the pale Venetian morning light, illuminating frescoed ceilings where painted angels seemed to witness the unfolding judgment below. As Commissario Bellini had stationed officers at every exit, ensuring that justice, once revealed, could not escape through Venice's labyrinthine passages. Count Alessandro Moretti sat flanked by uniformed carabinieri, his aristocratic features frozen in a mask of resigned defeat. The weight of his confession hung heavy in the air. The theft from his brother's laboratory, the sale of experimental medications, the desperate murder that had begun this chain of tragedy. Yet Hercule Poirot had not taken his customary position at the room center. Instead, he stood near the tall windows overlooking the Grand Canal, his green eyes reflecting a contemplation that spoke of deeper currents still unexplored. The methodical revelation. Ladies and gentlemen, Poirot began, turning from the windows with characteristic precision. We have this morning witnessed the confession of a murderer. Count Alessandro Moretti has admitted to killing his brother Paolo 3 years ago, driven by gambling debts and the desperate need to finance his dissolute lifestyle through the sale of stolen pharmaceutical compounds. He paused, allowing his penetrating gaze to sweep across the assembled faces. Clarissa, pale and trembling in her chair. Isabella, her eyes red with tears of grief and betrayal. Dr. Chen, standing with professional composure near the fireplace. Professor Blackwood, slumped in exhausted relief at his own exoneration. The others watching with varying degrees of anxiety and fascination. The evidence against the Count is overwhelming and undeniable, Poirot continued, his voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. His fingerprints on Paolo's research journals, the bank transfers following the pharmaceutical sales, the desperate motive that drove him to fratricide. Commissario Bellini has sufficient proof to ensure justice for Paolo Moretti's murder. Alessandro nodded mutely, his silence more eloquent than any
seal is most
protestation of
peculiar.
innocence.
A forgery,
However,
perhaps,
Poirot said
or
softly,
merely a clever
and in that
distraction.
single word, the entire atmosphere of the room shifted like a tide changing direction. Count Alessandro did not murder Sir Malcolm Pemberton, and he most certainly did not poison Lady Venetia Pemberton last evening. The twist revealed. The statement detonated like a thunderclap in the hushed salon. Alessandro's head snapped up with sudden, desperate hope. Isabella released a strangled gasp of confusion. Commissario Bellini surged to his feet in protest, with his hand instinctively moving toward
Sir
his
Edmund
weapon.
Valement's death.
But
The
the
more I
connection,
examine the facts,
Bellini
the deeper
sputtered,
the shadows seem to
gesturing at the
grow.
documents
It is
spread
a
across a
mystery
nearby
wrapped in a
table.
shroud.
The stolen
We
cardiac
depart for Berkshire
medications, the
immediately.
research Paolo was
See to the
conducting,
luggage yourself,
the timing
George.
of Sir
I
Malcolm's
want no
investigation.
mistakes. This case is far too important.
All true, and all deliberately arranged to lead us to precisely this conclusion, Poirot replied with the calm authority of a master chess player, revealing a long-planned gambit. Count Alessandro's genuine guilt for his brother's murder provided perfect camouflage for someone else's far more calculated crimes. Someone who recognized that the Count's desperation and obvious guilt would make him an ideal scapegoat for murders he never committed. He began his characteristic pacing, his hands clasped behind his back, each step measured and deliberate. Consider the methodology. De mes amis. Alessandro killed Paolo in a moment of panic, a clumsy drowning staged to appear accidental, leaving enough evidence that his own sister immediately suspected foul play. This is not the work of a methodical killer, but of an amateur driven by desperate circumstances and overwhelming guilt. the scientific deduction. Now observe the stark contrast in the murders of Sir Malcolm and Lady Pemberton, Poirot continued, his voice gaining intensity. Sir Malcolm's death was accomplished through the precise administration of cardiac stimulants to a man with undiagnosed heart disease, requiring intimate knowledge of both pharmacology and the victim's medical condition. Lady Pemberton's poisoning demanded not only access to cyanide, but the ability to administer it to a specific wine glass with surgical precision, knowing exactly when and how she would consume it. Dr. Chen leaned forward with professional interest. The dosage calculations alone would require extensive medical training. Precisely, Doctor. But more than medical knowledge, these crimes required something Alessandro has never possessed: patience, planning, and the cold-blooded calculation to kill, not once, but repeatedly, to protect a carefully constructed secret. Poirot stopped his pacing directly before Clarissa Pemberton, who had been sitting with unnatural stillness throughout the morning's revelations.
Terribly afraid.
Her pale hands twisted a lace handkerchief into ruins, and her blue eyes held a quality I had learned to recognize in the guilty.
A letter written
the
by my
terrible
late
tension
husband.
between hope and despair. The true killer exposed.
A letter written by your
Mademoiselle
husband?
Clarissa, Poirot said gently, and his voice carrying the compassionate
The
authority of a
letter was
confessor.
kept in a safe in the library.
You have remained remarkably composed for someone who has lost both her fiancé and her beloved aunt in the space
Devastating
of a
would be a
single
more
evening.
accurate word.
Your grief, while genuine, is not the grief of an
5
innocent
years ago,
victim,
Sir Edmund
but of
died
someone
in
who
this
has watched
library.
their carefully laid
The official
plans
cause was a
unfold
fall,
exactly
but I've
as
always
intended.
wondered what pushed him.
Clarissa's
Her
composure
husband
cracked
Dean
almost
is murder.
imperceptibly, a barely visible tremor passing through her delicate frame. I don't understand what you're suggesting, Monsieur Poirot. I've lost everything. My family, my future, my security. On the contrary, mademoiselle, you have gained everything. With your aunt's death occurring before she could sign the codicil disinheriting you, the original will stands intact. You inherit the entire Pemberton fortune, free from the controlling hand that has shaped every moment of your existence since childhood. He moved closer, his green
tell the
eyes
police.
never leaving her face.
If this came out, the scandal
You
would
discovered
destroy
Alessandro's
too many
guilt regarding
innocent
Paolo's
people.
murder through your own investigation
What
of
has
your aunt's
changed?
papers. But rather than report it to authorities, you realized his crimes provided you with a perfect
It
opportunity.
concerns Olivia
If
Ashton,
Lady Pemberton
my
died
husband's
before she could
secretary.
complete her disinheritance,
There was
and if Alessandro were subsequently
unpleasantness.
arrested for her murder, you would be free
Tell me,
of
Lady
both their
Constance,
control forever.
Have you read the letter?
The method revealed. The method was ingenious in its simplicity, Poirot
Every
continued,
terrible,
his voice taking on the
unforgivable word.
rhythm of inexorable logic. You knew your aunt's habits
I'm afraid
intimately.
these figures don't
Her
lie,
fastidiousness
Geoffrey.
about crystal.
It appears you've
her
been
tendency to
cooking the
reject any
books.
glass
You
with the
can't pin
slightest
this on me,
imperfection.
Constance.
Aren't you
This is
prepared the
Philip, as I
cyanide in
choose
advance,
to remember him.
waiting for the
Before the
inevitable
disgrace.
moment when she would
Before
demand
he
a
became the
replacement
wastrel
glass?
he is today.
Isabella's medical
There
training
is a
made her the
liaison
first to
in the
understand.
household.
The poison was already in the replacement
Betrayal.
glass before it was brought to the table.
Were you yourself
Exactament.
implicated, Lady Constance?
During the butler's brief
How
absence,
dare you?
a distraction
That
you
is an
arranged by
outrageous
sending word
suggestion.
about urgent gondolier business, you added the cyanide to the fresh glass waiting on the sideboard. When your aunt predictably rejected her original glass for a minor water spot, she sealed her own fate. Clarissa's face had gone white as Venetian marble, but her voice remained steady. You're constructing elaborate fiction, Monsieur Poirot. I was seated beside my aunt throughout dinner. Everyone can verify that. Indeed you were, but you excused yourself briefly during the final course, claiming a sudden headache. The service corridor behind the dining room provided perfect access to the sideboard without being observed by the other guests. A few drops of poison in the waiting glass, and your work was complete. The psychological motivation. Poirot's voice became almost gentle as he continued his methodical destruction of her facade. The tragedy, mademoiselle, is that your aunt's death was not necessary for your freedom. She threatened disinheritance, yes, but you could have simply married Alessandro despite her objections and lived modestly on his remaining resources. But that was not enough, was it?
This
You wanted
rose,
not
Lady
just
Constance.
freedom, but revenge
It holds
against the
the
woman
key
who
to
had
the secrets
controlled
we have
and
uncovered.
diminished you for so many years. Tears began to stream down Clarissa's face. Oh, but whether from grief or the relief of finally being understood, I could not determine. She made every decision for me, Clarissa whispered, her voice barely audible.
Your silence
What I
speaks
wore,
volumes,
whom I
Chambers.
spoke to,
Why did
where
you
I
lie
went,
about the key?
whom I
we
could
both
marry.
know the truth.
She said it was for my own
They are
good,
placed
that I
beneath
was
my
too weak
pillow
and
each
foolish to
night,
manage my own life.
routinely.
When she discovered Alessandro's debts, she didn't
Chambers
just
mentions
threaten
Timothy
to disinherit
Ashford
me.
visiting in
She
July.
told me I was worthless, that I deserved to be left with nothing. And so, you decided to leave her with nothing instead, Poirot concluded quietly. Her life, her carefully planned revelation, her control over your future, all ended in a moment of darkness that you had been planning for
I have
days.
been a blind,
The confession.
trusting fool.
The silence that followed was broken only by the distant sound of water lapping against the palazzo's ancient foundations. Then, slowly Clarissa's composure crumbled completely, like
You
a
seem
dam
preoccupied
finally
tonight, my lady.
yielding to
Does the
irresistible
caviar not
pressure.
agree with you, or is it something more pressing?
I didn't
I
want to
find
kill
it
her,
hard to
she
stomach
sobbed,
pleasantries when a
her
killer
voice
walks
breaking
in.
with the weight of suppressed guilt.
She was my
I
husband's
just wanted her to
mistress.
stop, to let me live my own life, make my own choices, even my own mistakes. But she would never have stopped, would she? Even if I had married Alessandro, even if I had children, she would have controlled them too,
£500,
shaped them
Olivia.
into her image
It's
of
more
what
than
they
generous
should
for
be.
your silence on the matter.
She looked up at
I
Alessandro with
expect you to
eyes
be gone
full of
by
anguish.
morning.
I'm
Monsieur
sorry.
Roderick,
I never meant
your
for you to be
attachment to Miss
blamed.
Olivia is
I
quite
thought,
profound, is it
I
not?
thought they
I
would
love
just
her.
accept that she died
I
of
don't care
shock
what
from
they
her
say.
own revelations.
And here,
I never imagined
amongst the
Monsieur
silver,
Poirot
the
would
truth
see through
begins
everything
to
so
gleam.
clearly. Justice and Resolution Commissario Bellini moved forward with the grim efficiency of a man who had witnessed too many family tragedies. Clarissa Pemberton, you are under arrest for the murder of Lady Venetia Pemberton. She offered no resistance as the officers led her away, her once fragile beauty now hardened into something resembling acceptance. At the doorway, she turned back to look at Alessandro one final time. We destroyed each other, didn't we? She said quietly. All of us, destroyed by secrets and lies and the terrible weight of trying to be what others expected us to be. Alessandro's response was barely a whisper. Forgive me, Clarissa. For Paolo, for the debts, for being too weak
I'm
to
asking
protect
you
you
one
from her
last
control.
time, Poirot. What exactly
There's nothing
do
left
you
to
want
forgive,
from me?
she replied.
Spit it out!
And then she was gone, leaving only the echo of her words in the ancient stone corridors. Poirot's philosophical reflection. As the palazzo slowly emptied and returned to its customary silence, I found Poirot on the water terrace where our adventure had begun. The fog had lifted completely, revealing Venice in all
Edmund
its
and
timeless
I
beauty.
never
Gondolas gliding
close.
across the canal with the grace of black swans. A terrible waste, I observed quietly, watching the police launch disappear into the distance with its
I
cargo
have
of
nothing
human
to
tragedy.
hide.
Indeed, Hastings, Poirot replied, his voice carrying the weight of profound sadness. 2 young lives destroyed by greed and desperation. 2 more by control and rebellion. Lady Pemberton created her own nemesis through her need to dominate, while Alessandro's weakness destroyed not only his brother, but ultimately the woman who might have saved him from himself. He adjusted his immaculate cuffs with characteristic precision, but his eyes
seem
remained
preoccupied
fixed
with
on
my
the
cellar,
canal's
Inspector.
flowing waters.
Merely admiring the collection, Sir
The little
Roderick.
gray cells.
Though I find
They can
some
solve the
volumes
puzzle
more
of who
revealing than
and
others.
how and when, but they cannot solve the deeper mystery of why human beings
mother
choose
is
to destroy
prone to
what they
flights of
claim to
fancy.
love. The departure. A gondola approached the palazzo's
discuss
landing,
the matter
its
of the
gondolier
stolen
calling out
letter,
in musical
then?
Italian that our water taxi to the railway station had
You know
arrived.
you were the last one in the
Poirot
vault,
straightened
Roderick.
his shoulders
Where
and
is the
turned
money?
away from the canal with the
swear I don't know what
decisive
you're
movement
talking
of a
about.
man
I didn't take
ready to
anything.
leave tragedy
This
behind.
rain,
Come, mon ami,
it feels
he said,
like a warning.
to his voice regaining its customary briskness. Venice is beautiful, but
I am a
beauty
grown
and tragedy
man, Mother.
together,
You cannot
none.
dictate my life
It is
any
not
longer.
good
If I
for the
choose to marry her,
digestion.
I will,
We will
and neither
catch the
you nor
afternoon
your money
express
will
to
stop me.
Paris. There
We
will
need
be
to
other
discuss
crimes,
Timothy
other
Ashford.
puzzles, other souls in need of the order that only truth can
I
provide.
have nothing to say about him.
As we
Look
walked
closely.
through the palazzo's ancient
The seal
halls
is
one
here,
final
yes,
time,
but this
I
tiny
reflected on the
smudge of
strange
wax tells
justice
us
that had been
everything we need
served.
to know.
4 people were dead. 2 killers would face the law's judgment, and the survivors would carry the weight of revealed truth for the rest of their lives. Yet somehow, in Hercule Poirot's methodical unraveling of deception, order had been restored to a small corner of a disordered world. The morning sun caught the crystal chandeliers as we passed beneath them, casting rainbow fragments across marble floors that had witnessed centuries of human drama. And in that play of light and shadow, I seemed to see the eternal pattern that Poirot had spent his life illuminating. The endless struggle between truth and deception, justice and vengeance, love and control. Epilogue. Our gondola pulled away from the Palazzo Rossetti as the church bells of Venice chimed noon, their bronze voices carrying across the water like a benediction. Poirot sat in characteristic silence, his green eyes reflecting the ancient city's beauty one final time before
You mustn't think
we
I
turned
regret
toward the
leaving,
railway
Inspector.
station and the world beyond.
But some shadows
You
are
know,
very
Hastings,
long.
he said finally, as the palazzo faded into the
Can't
distance.
keep this from you any longer.
In all my years of detection, I have
It's
learned
true.
that the most dangerous criminals
been
are
seeing
not
him.
those who kill for money or passion,
Honor
but those
is a
who kill to
dangerous
escape the
thing,
prisons they have
Poirot.
built around themselves. Clarissa Pemberton was both victim and perpetrator, trapped by circumstances she could not control and the choices she could not undo. And justice? I asked, echoing our earlier conversation. Justice has been served, he replied with quiet certainty. But justice,
I believe these
like
ledgers
truth,
confirm the
comes at a
discrepancies
price.
we discussed, Mr.
The
Marsden.
living must now find a way to continue,
House.
despite knowing what they know,
I see it clearly.
bearing what they must
Missing piece
bear.
was right in front of me
That,
the entire
mon ami,
time.
is perhaps the heaviest
One of you in this
burden
very
of
room
all.
is guilty of this heinous
The
crime.
train whistle echoed across the
evidence,
lagoon
I
as we
assure
approached
you,
the station,
is irrefutable.
calling us back to a world where Hercule
Perhaps
Poirot's
murder.
reputation for solving
was
the
not a
impossible
fall.
would soon attract new mysteries, new tragedies, new opportunities to
You
impose
took the letter
order
to
upon
protect your
chaos.
father's memory, did you
But
not?
the case of the Palazzo Rossetti would remain with us always. A reminder that the human
couldn't let
heart,
the truth
in
come
all
out
its
about the
complexity
affair.
and contradiction,
tried to bury it,
remains
Father.
the greatest
It was
mystery of
misguided
all.
loyalty, I know that now.
And
the
so
murder
ended
was
our
separate.
Venetian adventure, leaving behind in that ancient city of water and stone the mortal remains of 4 souls whose lives had become fatally entangled in a web of secrets, lies, and the terrible consequences of choices made in darkness. The fog had lifted, the truth had been revealed, and Hercule Poirot, with his customary precision and impeccable composure, had once again proven that no mystery, however complex, could withstand the methodical application of logic, psychology, and those famous little gray cells. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Palazzo Rossetti's water terrace as the remaining guests prepared their departures. The ancient stones seemed to exhale the weight of tragedy, releasing 3 years of accumulated secrets into the Venetian air. Isabella Moretti stood beside the canal's edge, her dark eyes reflecting both grief and a strange sense of liberation.
I don't know how to thank you, Monsieur Poirot.
How does one continue
You've
after
given
learning
us a
such
chance
terrible
at
truths
peace.
about one's own family? She asked quietly, watching a gondola glide past with deceptive serenity. Poirot regarded her with profound compassion. Mademoiselle, you possess the courage that your brother Alessandro lacked, the strength to seek truth, even when it leads through darkness. That same courage will guide you forward. Professor Blackwood departed first, his shoulders bowed with the weight of exposed compromises, but his freedom intact. Dr. Chen followed, his professional reputation damaged, but his integrity ultimately vindicated. Each carried their own burden of knowledge, their own lessons learned in the harsh light of revelation. I shall return to my work with Doctors Without Borders, Isabella announced with quiet determination. Perhaps there is enough good to be done in this world to balance the scales of my family's legacy. A noble decision, Poirot approved. Remember, We cannot change the past, but we choose how we carry its weight into the future. As our water taxi approached for the journey to the railway station, I observed the contemplative mood that had
But I
settled
told you,
over my friend.
I lost my
The
ticket.
case had been solved
You
with
must believe
characteristic
me, I need to
brilliance,
leave tonight.
yet something deeper troubled him. The train to Paris
was
awaited us
terrified,
with mechanical
begging me
patience,
not to go to the
its
police.
steam rising like
But I had to
incense
tell
from some
someone.
industrial altar.
I had to tell you.
Look,
As
over
we
there.
settled into our
That is where I
compartment,
saw him standing just
Poirot
before the
arranged
whistle
his
blew.
belongings
The timing
with
is
customary
crucial,
precision.
madame.
Each
Crucial.
item placed with the mathematical accuracy that reflected his need for order in a chaotic world. "You are troubled, Poirot?" I ventured as the Italian countryside began to slide past our window. "Not troubled, mon ami, but contemplative," he replied, his fingers
You
steepled
have not
beneath
accounted
his
for your
chin.
movements between 10 and
"We have
midnight.
solved the
I was
mystery,
alone.
yes. Justice
Why
will
must
be
you
served
persist with
according
these
to law.
dreadful accusations?
Alessandro faces decades of imprisonment for Paolo's murder and the pharmaceutical thefts. Clarissa will stand trial for her aunt's poisoning, though the psychiatrists already argue for diminished responsibility." He paused, watching olive groves and vineyards blur past in autumn sunlight. "But what haunts me is the waste of it all, Hastings. 2 young people destroyed not by external evil, but by the gradual corruption of their own choices. Alessandro possessed every advantage: noble birth, intelligence,
chaos, this
opportunity,
smoke.
yet threw it all away for
Are you trying to
gambling's
hide
fleeting
something,
excitement.
or merely escape it?
Clarissa had beauty, education, and wealth, yet chose murder rather than simply walking away from her aunt's control. They could have sought other solutions, I observed. Precisely. But that is murder's terrible seduction. It offers the illusion of a simple solution to complex problems. One act, one moment of violence, and all difficulties appear to vanish. Except they multiply instead, spreading like poison through every life they touch. I had received a letter from Commissario Bellini that morning,
Where were you at
which
10
I
o'clock,
now
Mrs.
shared
Gilman?
with Poirot.
I told
The
you I was in
Italian
my
authorities
room.
had moved
I didn't
swiftly.
see anything, I swear.
Alessandro's full confession to Paolo's
Martine.
murder, or combined with evidence
if
of
this
the
is true,
pharmaceutical
sir,
thefts,
then
would
you are
result in a
guilty
lengthy
of
sentence.
bigamy.
His gambling debts, the stolen research compounds, the desperate drowning staged as an accident, all had been documented with methodical thoroughness.
The truth regarding the fortune. It was
And
not
what of
chance,
Clarissa's
Inspector,
fate?
but a
I
meticulous
asked.
deception. I
The
simply applied
Italian
my little
courts
grey
show
cells to the
little
curious
mercy
case
for
of the missing heir.
premeditated murder,
your hands behind your
Poirot
back.
replied gravely. Yet her advocates
All right,
will
let's
argue
go. Move it.
diminished capacity, years of psychological abuse, the systematic destruction of her autonomy. It is possible she will find herself in an institution rather than a prison. But wherever she goes, she cannot escape the knowledge of what she has done. The train's rhythm provided a hypnotic backdrop to our conversation as Poirot continued his analysis. What strikes me most profoundly is that both killers believed themselves justified. Alessandro convinced himself that Paolo's death was necessary for survival. Clarissa saw her aunt's murder as the only path to freedom. Neither recognized themselves as villains, but as victims forced into terrible actions. The psychology of it fascinates and appalls me, I admitted. Indeed, they sought freedom through violence, only to discover that murder creates the most inescapable prison of all. Alessandro will spend decades in confinement, but his true cage was built the moment he held Paolo beneath the water. Clarissa's prison was constructed when she dropped poison into that wine glass. As afternoon shadows lengthened, Poirot straightened his tie with characteristic precision. "Come, Hastings, we have done what we could. Truth has been revealed, order restored to a small corner of our disordered world. That must suffice." The train whistle echoed across the Italian countryside as we rushed toward Paris and whatever new mysteries awaited. Behind us, Venice preserved its ancient secrets while releasing the burden of these particular tragedies
He threatened
into
me.
history's keeping. There will
I
always
cannot
be
let
new
this
puzzles,
continue.
Poirot mused, opening a volume of French poetry. New disorders requiring the attention of the little gray cells. But for now, let us rest in the satisfaction of truth, triumphant over deception. And with that philosophical benediction, Hercule Poirot settled back to read, his mind already preparing for whatever challenge fate would next place in his methodical path. The rhythmic clatter of the Simplon Orient Express wheels against the rails provided a hypnotic soundtrack as our train carved through the Italian Alps, carrying us away from the tragic waters of Venice. The compartment's amber lighting cast dancing shadows across the burgundy upholstery, while outside the window, moonlight illuminated the snow-capped peaks like ancient guardians watching over the valleys below. Hercule Poirot sat opposite me with characteristic precision, his small hands folded over a leather portfolio containing the final correspondence regarding our Venetian affair. Though his appearance remained immaculate as always, I detected an unusual pensiveness in his green eyes, the contemplative mood of a man who had witnessed the darkest corners of the human heart and found them more troubling than satisfying. The final resolutions. The post from Commissario Bellini arrived this morning, Poirot announced, producing several official documents from his portfolio with methodical care. The legal machinery of justice has completed its work, mon ami. Though whether true justice has been served remains a question for philosophers rather than detectives. He spread the papers across our small table like pieces of an elaborate puzzle finally assembled. Count Alessandro Moretti has been sentenced to 25 years imprisonment for the murder of his brother Paolo and the theft of experimental pharmaceutical compounds. His confession was complete and unrepentant. He described in detail how gambling debts exceeding 300,000 euros drove him to steal Paolo's cardiac research,
runs on
and how he arranged the boating accident when Paolo discovered the theft
The truth has
and
a way of
threatened
cutting
exposure.
through the haze.
I studied the official documents,
Take a good
noting
look.
the clinical language that
Every
reduced
last one
human
of them is a
tragedy to legal
masterpiece of
terminology.
forgery.
And Clarissa?
So, Mr. Marsden,
Let us
us
the case
discuss
of
the
Mademoiselle
crimson
Clarissa
letter.
proves more complex, Poirot replied, his voice softening with something approaching compassion. The psychiatric evaluation reveals severe dissociative episodes alternating with periods of complete lucidity. During her coherent moments, she expresses genuine remorse, while simultaneously insisting her aunt's death was inevitable. He produced a small folded piece of paper, a note Clarissa had attempted to pass to Alessandro as the police led her away.
I swear I didn't mean to do it.
She
It was an
wrote
accident,
this,
you must
Hastings.
believe me.
Read
I
it,
see.
and you will understand the depths of her desperation. I unfolded the paper carefully. In elegant, trembling script, it read, "We were drowning long before the water took Paolo. I only wanted to breathe." Tragic, I murmured. Near the simple words carrying the weight of a life systematically destroyed by control, disguised as love. The Italian courts will ultimately decide between premeditated murder and diminished capacity, Poirot continued, refolding the note with characteristic precision. But the psychiatrists paint a portrait of someone whose personality was systematically dismantled
Mon
over
Dieu.
decades of psychological
Lady
manipulation.
Constance's dress.
Lady Pemberton created her
The killer
own
must have
murderer
torn it
through the
during the
very
struggle.
actions she believed were protective. The wider consequences. Poirot consulted another letter, this one bearing the seal of the Venetian Cultural Ministry.
You know the truth, but
Lady
you don't.
Pemberton's vast estate,
I won't let
lacking
you
a
ruin
legitimate
me
heir
based on
under the final
speculation.
rulings,
I
has
am
been
an
divided
innocent
between
man.
charitable trusts and the preservation of Venetian heritage, fulfilling, ironically and posthumously, the intentions she had attempted to realize
I couldn't
through
let
her
them find
unsent
it.
codicil.
I
And
burned
the
the
others?
secondary letter myself.
Professor Blackwood has returned to Oxford under something of a
Honor,
cloud, though
Sir
the scandal
Roderick,
has prompted overdue
can be a
reforms in
heavy
archaeological
chain.
funding and private collections. Dr. Chen was quietly exonerated and has taken a hospital position in Milan, his reputation damaged, but his integrity ultimately vindicated. As for the solicitor Thornton, he faces several years' imprisonment for embezzlement, though he was cleared of any involvement in the murders.
You should never
The
have come back
train
here. You
whistled
know too
as we
much.
entered a tunnel,
Please,
the
let me
sudden
explain.
darkness
It wasn't my
mirroring
fault.
the gloom
She's
of our
lying.
conversation.
Get rid of her.
When we emerged into the
I'm
moonlight
afraid
again,
Philip is a married
Poirot's
man, Lady
expression had
Constance.
grown thoughtful.
He committed bigamy when he
There is
married your
one
sister.
final piece of correspondence that provides perhaps the only light in this darkness, he said. I'm producing a carefully wrapped package. From Dr. Isabella Moretti, who has returned to her humanitarian work abroad. Inside lay a simple fountain pen, its black barrel worn smooth from years of use. along with a photograph of a memorial plaque installed in a Venetian hospital laboratory. The inscription read, "In memory of Dr. Paolo Moretti, whose research into life-saving cardiac treatments continues to serve humanity." She writes that something of her brother's work will continue where greed attempted to corrupt it, Poirot observed quietly. Out of great wrong, perhaps, may come a little right. The deeper reflections, as the train rushed through the alpine darkness toward Paris, and I found myself contemplating the strange alchemy of detective work, how Poirot's methodical brilliance could illuminate the darkest corners of human nature while simultaneously revealing truths almost too painful to bear. "You are troubled by the case, Hastings?" Poirot inquired, noting my contemplative silence. "I was thinking about justice, Poirot. We caught the killers, yes, but 4 lives ended. Sir Malcolm, Paolo, Lady Venetia, and, in a sense, Clarissa herself. Does it truly balance the scales?" Poirot nodded slowly, his famous mustaches reflecting the compartment's amber light. "Justice, mon ami, is a tool of the living, not a remedy for the dead. It restores order to society, but it cannot restore breath to those who have lost it. We have exposed the truth, which is the detective's only true duty. And the rest is for the courts and for God." He leaned back in his seat, his green eyes reflecting depths of understanding accumulated over decades of confronting human darkness.
Peaceful, doesn't
What strikes
it?
me most profoundly is how often murder springs not from hatred alone, but from a distorted longing for freedom, dignity, control of one's own life. Lady Pemberton sought to control everything. Alessandro sought to escape responsibility without sacrificing luxury. Clarissa desired liberation, yet could not imagine it without inheritance. They believed they were trapped by circumstances, I observed. Precisely. But the trap was of their own making. Alessandro could have faced his debts honestly. Clarissa could have walked away from her aunt's fortune. They chose murder not because it was their only option, but because it was the option that allowed them to keep their illusions. The illusion of the noble count who could maintain his lifestyle without work. The illusion of the dutiful niece who deserved her inheritance.
Ceremony. They knew
The
precisely when the
philosophical
distraction
resolution.
would occur.
The train's rhythm provided a hypnotic backdrop as Poirot continued his analysis. They killed to protect these false images of themselves, Hastings, and in doing so, they destroyed the reality of their lives completely. It is a remarkable thing how the human mind can convince itself that violence is the solution to moral problems, when in truth, violence only creates greater moral problems.
Look here, mademoiselle.
He reached for his glass of creme de menthe, holding the green
Thomas
liquid to
moved
the
away
light,
shortly
a
after
color
his
that
sister's
reminded me
death.
uncomfortably of the poison that had claimed Lady Pemberton's life. "To truth, Hastings," he said quietly, raising his glass. "However bitter it may taste, it is the only medicine that cures the sickness of deception." We drank the toast in contemplative silence. Outside our window, the ancient Alps stood sentinel over valleys
But why would
where
he leave the
countless
window
human
open, Miss
dramas
Marple?
had played out across
Perhaps
the
because he
centuries.
intended for us to
Stories of
believe he
love
entered
and
that way,
betrayal,
Inspector.
greed and sacrifice, justice and vengeance. "The little gray cells have performed their function," Poirot announced finally, setting down his glass with characteristic precision. "The puzzle is solved. The pieces are back in their box. But the deeper mystery,
So, the great
why
Poirot
human
finally
beings
shows
choose to
his true
destroy
colours.
what they claim to
I
love,
presume you
that
found what you were
remains
looking for in my
beyond
absence.
any detective's
You see,
jurisdiction.
Inspector,
Looking
the real
forward,
nephew
as we
died
approached the
years
French
ago.
border, I
This
ventured
man
a
is an
question that had been
imposter
troubling me
and a
throughout
killer.
our journey. Will you write up the case yourself, Poirot? "No, mon ami. That honor belongs to you, as always. But I suggest you
One
treat
of you
this
in
case
this room
differently
tonight
from
is
our
a
usual
murderer.
adventures. Let your readers understand that murder is not a parlor game or an
sought to
intellectual
hide your
puzzle,
past,
but a
did you
tragedy
not?
that destroys everyone it touches, victim, perpetrator, and
There's no use
witness
denying
alike."
it now. The
"And
serum
the next
wasn't
mystery?"
stable.
I asked,
I let
knowing the
ambition
answer.
cloud my judgment.
Poirot
Now she's
smiled,
gone.
smoothing his mustaches with renewed energy. "Ah, The next mystery. It always waits, does it not? Human nature is a boundless source of puzzles. As long as people desire what they cannot have, or fear losing what they possess, there will be work for Hercule Poirot. The train whistle shrieked as we crossed into France, leaving the tragedy of the Palazzo Rossetti behind in the Italian darkness. See, yet I knew that Venice had left its watermark upon us both, a subtle imprint of the eternal struggle between order and chaos, truth and deception, justice and the enigmatic workings of the human heart. In the morning, we would arrive in Paris, where new clients would soon appear at our door, with their own desperate secrets and hidden crimes. The little gray cells would be called upon once again to impose order upon chaos, to reveal truth hidden beneath layers of deception. But for now, as the express carried us through the sleeping countryside toward whatever adventures awaited, I was content to sit in comfortable silence with the most remarkable detective I had ever known, watching the ancient world slip past our window like shadows dissolving in the light of approaching dawn. The case of the Palazzo Rossetti was closed. Justice, in its imperfect human form, had been served. And somewhere in the distance, Venice continued its eternal dance with the tides, keeping its remaining secrets safe beneath the mists that would always shroud the city of water, stone, and endless mystery.